And to introduce this, I'm going to share a quick story about a young man named Bobby. So Bobby was 15 years old. He was always in trouble at school, and the reasons weren't hard to find. He had a very, very difficult family life. He had been in and out of foster care, troubled situation, and he expressed that at school with outburst and poor discipline. And so he was routinely being sent to the principal's office for discipline. And one day he was sent there, and he met a brand new counselor that had just started work, a gentleman named Murphy. So picture this. These two are meeting for the first time. After their introductions, what do you think is the first thing Murphy's going to say, or the question he's going to ask? Maybe, what happened, Bobby? Tell me your side of this, or what's going on? What's the problem, Bobby? Like, that's what we expect. Listen to what Murphy actually said. Bobby, tell me about the times at school when you don't get in trouble as much. Well, now that's interesting, right? That's not what we expect. So Murphy is a practitioner of a branch of therapy called Solutions-Focused Brief Therapy, SFBT. The heart of what makes this branch different is that in most change situations, this is the problem that we always default to. What's the problem and how do we solve it? Every time. What's the problem and how do we solve it? And it's not that that's a bad question, it's a great question. But we're actually so good at asking this question, it blinds us to another question that is every bit as useful but rarely asked, and that's this question. What's working? What's working and how do we reproduce it? And that is a philosophy that I'll call finding the bright spots. So notice, Murphy is looking for the bright spots. Tell me about the times at school when you don't get in trouble as much. And Bobby says, I never get in trouble, well, not a lot, in Miss class. What's different about Miss class? Notice he's probing for specifics. Bobby says, I don't know, she's nicer, we get along great. So Murphy's not satisfied with those vague answers, and so he keeps probing. He's trying to figure out what's the recipe, right, to get better behavior from Bobby. And he eventually surfaces 3 very specific things that Mrs. Smith does differently. So here they are. Number 1, she greets him at the door with a smile. You know, understandably, some of Bobby's other teachers tended to kind of creep the other way when they saw him coming, but not Mrs. Smith. She greeted him openly and warmly. 2, she gave him easier work to complete when she could. And 3, she would always make sure that he understood the instructions, because when he was confused, it was often a trigger for bad behavior. So Murphy says, aha, well, what if I go to the other teachers? And he did, and he went to those teachers and he says, look, I know you've struggled with Bobby. Will you try 3 things for me? Will you try greeting him at the door? Will you try giving him easier work to complete when you can? Will you make sure he understands the instructions? And what were the results? Well, here was his track record before. In 6 classes in a given day, he was getting in trouble on average in 4 or 5 out of the 6. After this intervention, it was reduced to 1 or 2 classes out of 6. Now, let me acknowledge the obvious, which is this did not transform Bobby into an angel, right? He is still getting in trouble on average every single day at school, but it made a massive difference in his behavior in a positive direction, even though it didn't solve any of the underlying problems he had at home, right? That was a huge improvement driven by a search for what's working today despite some of the obstacles. Are you all on the lookout for bright spots in your work? And I think when I ask that question to business leaders, a lot of times their answer is, well, sure, I'm on the lookout for bright spots. I love it when things succeed. I notice it. My team celebrates our victories, and that's all great, but I'm actually pushing for something a little bit deeper. So let me explain. I have this little pad that I use. I'll be up here in the corner. So let's say that you're looking at some data. It could be anything. I'll just draw a kind of normal-ish distribution. maybe this is employee engagement data. And so you've got a lot of employees here in the middle who are pretty satisfied, pretty engaged. You've got some employees over here who are like over the moon, they love it. And you've got some employees over here who are quite disengaged. And so where does the focus of most organizational leaders go in a chart like this? Just pop it in chat. Left side, right side, or middle? Where does it go? Left, 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 left. Yep, I'm 100% with you. Every time our attention goes over here, right? And why do we do that? Because listen to the logic, that's where the problem is, right? Now, I want to be clear about this. There's nothing wrong with solving problems. It's not like a terrible error we've made and we should knock it off. No, we should always solve problems. We should always pay attention to what's not working. But my point is that we have gotten badly out of proportion, right? It's like we were born with 2 biceps. And one of them we use every day, and we go to the gym and we like lift curls 1 billion times, and the other one is just kind of sad and flaccid and underused, right? Even though they both have the same potential. That's my point about this, is we spend so much time over here, we never get around to asking a very basic question, which is, why are these people so engaged? And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of situations in organizations where what they learned over here makes everybody better, right? Because you can distill the solutions that made those people happier and spread them to more. I'll give you another example. Let's make this more of a management example. So just for fun, let's say you do a career switch and now you're in sales. So here are the sales of your sales reps. Let's say you have 6 reps reporting to you. So here was their performance last quarter. There they are. And then just for context, let's say that this was their sales quota. So you can see we've got 2 reps over here. Again, I asked the question, for most sales managers in the world, where does their attention go every time? And you know the answer. It goes over here to these 2 yahoos, right? Every time. And we actually have this whole story that we tell ourselves. Listen to this story. Well, you know, thank goodness that I have Michael and Maria on my team, right? Because I know I can count on them. They don't need much from me. They always get things done. And that frees me up to go where? Where the problem is. But do you hear how backwards that is when you really think about it, folks? Because look, there is a lot that we can learn over here. We can distill the practices that make these reps successful and spread those practices to everybody else to make everyone more successful. Now, just one final thought. In a second, I'm going to give you a chance to brainstorm about this, but just one final point. I want to be clear on, I think there are smarter and less smart ways to do bright spot analysis. So for instance, let's say that you were working on malnourished children in some impoverished country and you wanted to make them healthier and better nourished. Would it help you to do a bright spots analysis where you figured out, hey, the healthiest children in the world are in Sweden, so let's study those children, right? And figure out what their secrets are so we can spread them to this country. Well, no, right? Because it's apples to oranges. Right? The power of bright spots analysis is when you look in a coherent set of data. So what you want to do is you want to look within the impoverished country and see which children are doing better, and might you discover something about the way they're being nourished that is replicable for all of their peers. You see what I'm getting at? So that's the art of bright spots, is taking situations where you have variability and looking at the positive outliers in that data set. So bottom line, we've got to learn not just to celebrate success, but to study it. And let me give you just a quick chance to brainstorm about this. In the next 60 seconds, in the context of the things you're thinking about right now at work, your goals, have you exhausted the bright spots that you might study for inspiration? And if not, where might you go looking So just take a minute to brainstorm about that, and then I'll come right back.